In 1974, a whole family disappeared without a trace from their tranquil home in the suburbs of Sheffield, England. The dinner table was left set, hot food cooling in the evening air. No signs of a struggle, no hint of where the Cornwell family had gone, nor how they'd left. For years afterward, whispers of the unsolved case clung to the neighborhood, until curiosity faded into resignation. Half a century later, in 2024, a young artist named April Fenn attends the auction of a derelict house, the very same the Cornwells once called home. Among piles of unwanted relics, she discovers an old Olympus instant camera. Inside, a cartridge sealed so tightly that time itself seemed to have forgotten it. Its contents, however, never should have seen daylight. What you're about to hear is a narrative shaped by shadows and facts, inspired by a secret that slept for 50 years. Sheffield, England. October 15, 1974. The Cornwell kitchen was caught between day and night, the window glass streaked with the last gold of sunset. A slow-turning ceiling fan pushed stale air over 4 dinner plates, each laid out with lamb stew, peas, and mashed potatoes. Cups sat half-drunk, one a faded green mug, spilled across a placemat smeared with a child's drawing in waxy blue crayon. Chairs stood uneven, 2 neatly tucked, one pushed back, another left, jutting, as if vacated in an urgent moment. On the worn linoleum floor, a toy steam train chugged in languid circles before sputtering out in silence, its string wrapped around a kitchen leg. Scratching anxiously at the door was Duke, the family's old Springer Spaniel. The front door, gaping open, let the autumn breeze chase in dried leaves. Later, neighbors would claim the Cornwell's lights burned well past midnight, a thing they'd never done. Not stoic Martin, who worked the graveyard shift at the steel mill. Not Anne, who tidied her children to bed at 8 sharp. Nor shy Daisy and cheerful Ned, who would never have run into the night. But that evening, no one called the police. Not yet. It was Anne's sister who found the house still and hollow the next morning, the car untouched in the drive, beds not slept in, toothbrushes damp, Anne's handbag beside the radio, Martin's gold watch carefully placed by the sink. In the lounge, half buried beneath a dust cloth, sat the family's beloved Olympus camera, its strap coiled, lens smudged. No bodies, no blood, no note, no break-in, no calls for ransom. Just life interrupted, cut off halfway through a sentence. Within the next 48 hours, the Cornwells' disappearance became the talk of Yorkshire. Police combed the hills with dogs, helicopters searched from the air, and journalists swarmed outside the house, hoping for a breakthrough in a case that grew stranger by the day. Conspiracy theories flourished, perhaps a cult, a bizarre accident, or Martin's secret debts catching up with him. Some claimed to have seen lights flicker in the house at odd hours. Others confessed, only years later, that they always avoided walking on that side of the street after sunset. But as weeks melted into months and seasons shifted, interest faded. The Cornwell house changed hands a few times, but tenants never stayed long. Some said they felt watched. Others complained of icy drafts or the distant sound of a camera shutter in the night. By the 90s, the property was eventually left idle belongings, boxed and stacked in an attic no one wished to clear. In early 2024, the old Cornwell residence was placed for auction, just another rundown house offered by the city council. April Fenn, whose art thrived on discarded stories and found objects, wasn't looking for treasure. She just liked the rush of possibility at sales like these. The day of the auction was cold, wind rattling broken fence posts and carrying the distant clang of the city's steelworks. The house itself, paint peeling and windows patched with tape, looked forgotten by everyone except a cluster of bidders and the auctioneer in a tweed cap shuffling through his list. Inside, April wandered from room to room, The stale air was thick with lemon-scented cleaner and something else, old photographs, maybe, or time itself. She drifted apart from the others until she found herself in a small side lounge. There, on a battered oak sideboard, sat an Olympus Instant 200 camera. It was heavy in her hand, its rubber grip worn smooth. Most remarkable, it still held a thick, sealed cartridge. Yellow tape covered the latch, marked with faded red pencil. "Do not open." April grinned, almost involuntarily. Was it a prank, or some warning left by a forgotten resident? Curiosity outmatched caution. She bought the camera for £5, barely listened to the auctioneer's quick patter, and left with her new artifact bundled under her arm. That night, at her flat above a bakery, April could not sleep. She laid the Olympus on her kitchen table beside a cold mug of tea and stared at the warning. "Do not open." But the urge to know was stronger than dread. With shaking hands, she unwrapped the tape, slotted the cartridge in, freshened the batteries, and pressed the shutter. First image, blank, overexposed by time. Second, equally black, the chemical layers long since soured. But the third, April's pulse hammered as grays and shadows began to emerge. A kitchen table, same as before. 4 plates, cups, a single overturned mug. Light from the setting sun glinting off the cutlery. A child's drawing in the center blue scribbles, nearly identical to the one described in the old case files. In the corner of the photo, barely visible, a hand, white-knuckled, gripping the edge of the table, not posed, but stubbornly, desperately present. April's skin prickled. She tried another shot. This time, the hallway, yellow wallpaper, family photos on one wall. The angle strange, too close, as if someone snapped it while hiding. Her breath caught. The last image emerged from the camera, soft and ghostly. The same kitchen, chairs toppled, plates gone, one light fixture hanging lopsided, its glass shattered. In the shadow of the doorway, a small silhouetted child, back turned, staring into the dusk outside and behind her. A strange, elongated blur, too tall and angular to belong. April stared, realization chilling her. These were the last moments, but not everyone who appeared in the photos was in the police reports. April set the camera down, her nerves jangling. She arranged the photos in the order they developed, examining each detail by lamplight. These weren't ordinary snapshots, nor the work of a bored child. There was an urgency in the composition, a franticness, a silent shout embedded in color and light. Unable to shake the feeling that she was missing something critical, April opened her laptop and plunged into hours of research. Newspaper archives, public records, and local forums brought up the same refrain. No sign, no motive, just an open door and the ghosts it left behind. One post caught her eye. A retired constable recalling how, days after the Cornwell family vanished, investigators had logged the Olympus camera as non-evidence. The film compartment was listed as empty, but it hadn't been empty, not truly. April realized the film had waited, dormant, sealed by someone who didn't want the truth to develop until now. That night, unable to sleep, April drove past the old Cornwell house. The windows were boarded, but from beneath the boards of an upper room, she glimpsed an eerie, flickering glow. Was it just the play of streetlight, or something else, prowling the shadows of memory? She took a photograph of the facade before fleeing, the sensation of being watched icy on her skin. By morning, obsession had taken hold. She contacted a friend, Oliver Reed, a historian with connections to the city archives. She sent him digital scans of the mysterious Polaroids, along with her notes. Hand, silhouette, unnatural figure. Oliver replied quickly. These aren't just relics. The last image? that shape beside the child. Local legends warned of someone else, always watching, sometimes called the tall guest, never photographed until now. April's mind spun. The tall guest had haunted Sheffield ghost stories for decades, a nameless watcher, peering through windows, always present before disaster struck. But she'd never believed it, until a half-century-old camera offered proof. By the end of the week, a storm battered Sheffield. April and Oliver met in a cafe near the city library, poring over the case, the Cornwells, the warnings, the forgotten film, and a new, chilling question. Was the tall guest a legend? Or something, or someone, who'd never truly left the Cornwell house at all? The next day, driven by a need for answers, April convinced Oliver to revisit the Cornwell house with her. The property was officially off limits, but the back garden fence was warped and easy to slip through. The rain had churned the yard into mud, every step sucking at their boots as they approached the side window, unlocked since the last tenants left in haste. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the memory of years gone by. The wallpaper peeled in ragged strips. April's flashlight flickered over ghostly outlines on the walls, family portraits long removed, leaving only pale rectangles behind. The kitchen was eerily untouched, as if expecting the family's return at any moment, although a heavy silence had replaced any warmth or welcome. April traced her steps to the lounge, where she'd first found the camera. Dust motes spun in her light. She froze. On the floor, among toppled boxes, she noticed a single Polaroid that hadn't been there before. It was face down, half hidden under a fragment of newspaper. Heart thudding, she picked it up. The photo showed the Cornwell children, Daisy and Ned, standing in the garden. But something was wrong beside them. Almost camouflaged in the shade of an overgrown hedge, loomed the warped outline of a tall, thin man. His face was lost in blur and shadow, but his presence felt unmistakably hostile. Oliver knelt beside her. That hedge was cut back in the 80s. This can only be from before the disappearance. April wanted to drop the photo but couldn't. She realized the warnings hadn't been just legend or parental threats. The Cornwells perhaps had tried to capture the visitor on film. Had someone developed the photo after the family vanished? Or did it develop itself, pulled from the dark by the same force that had haunted the house? A rush of cold swept by, the sound of movement upstairs, a faint shuffling, too steady to be explained by wind or rodents. Oliver touched her sleeve. "Did you see that?" he whispered. April turned her light to the staircase. Shadows shifted at the landing. The two retreated, pulse pounding out into the night and the howling rain. As they fled the property, April swore she heard the distant click of a camera shutter echo from the darkness above. Back at her flat, April barely slept. She spread out all the photos, new and old, across her kitchen table, trying to arrange them not just by date, but by feeling the progression of anxiety, the way the house seemed to close in on its inhabitants with every frame. She made a list of patterns. In every picture, the children looked slightly away from the camera, as if distracted by something lurking just beyond the lens. The presence of the tall guest grew clearer, more defined, as time passed, the shadowy outline first faint, then unmistakable. In the final image, the kitchen was as empty as any tomb, yet there was just barely the glint of something in the hallway mirror. Two shapes, not only the guest, but another face, warped and pale, watching from the darkness. Feeling more like an investigator than an artist, April digitized each photo, enhanced the shadows and reflections, and posted a careful summary, without names or addresses, on an internet forum dedicated to cold cases. She asked, "Has anyone tall guessed inside after sundown?" One message, however, stood out, arriving in the dead of night from a user named dusk. I saw him once, 1973. If you haven't already, check the basement beneath the old Cornwell house. There's a trapdoor under the pantry shelves. You'll know what to look for. Be careful. Things left in the dark sometimes want to be found. April reread the message, heart thudding, unsure if it was a clue or a threat. But her curiosity, now burning with new fear, left her little choice. The following morning, she met Oliver at the library steps. The rain had stopped, but mist curled between the damp stones. She showed him the message. "I think I have to look," she whispered. Oliver hesitated, then nodded. Not alone. That afternoon, armed with gloves, a flashlight, and growing dread, they returned to the Cornwell house, this time determined to break the story's last seal. They entered through the side window, moving like trespassers, but with the resolve of seasoned detectives. April led the way to the musty pantry, a narrow room lined with old shelves, dust, and forgotten jars thick on every surface. On her knees, she tapped along the wooden floor until her hand struck a hollow sound. Peeling away a warped board, she uncovered the rusty ring of a trapdoor. Together, April and Oliver pried it loose, revealing a steep stairwell descending into the dark belly beneath the house. The air stank of earth and mold. With a trembling hand, April swept her light over stone walls, jagged corners, and, shocking her, a row of ancient photographs tacked along a wooden beam. She drew closer. The pictures were faded and yellowed, but among them she recognized the Cornwell family dinners, birthdays, a snow-covered garden. In the corner of one photograph stood the tall guest, blurred but unmistakable, staring straight at the camera. In another, the guest's distorted reflection hovered in a cracked mirror, featureless, watchful. Near the back of the cellar, a rotten trunk lay wedged beneath a leaking drain pipe. April opened it carefully. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small child's shoe, a coil of blue yarn, and several undeveloped negatives, one labeled "The Night." Oliver glanced at April, unease written on his face. "We need to go before it gets dark." But April, transfixed, raised her light again, and her beam caught movement. At the edge of the cellar, where the wall met the floor, an opening gaped. From the darkness, something watched them, not moving, not breathing, but undeniably there. The temperature dropped. Behind them, the trapdoor slammed shut with bone-deep finality. April screamed. Oliver lunged, wrenching the ring up with desperate strength. They scrambled up the stairs, heartbeats thunderous in the silent house. Out in the open air, they raced across the sodden garden and didn't stop until the house was 2 blocks behind them. Breathless and shaken, April clutched the oilcloth bundle proof that there was something deeply wrong about the Cornwell disappearance, something still unresolved, still predatory. That night, April developed the negatives in her bathroom, improvising a dark room with towels and blackout curtains. One by one, the images emerged, grainy but unmistakable. The children, Daisy and Ned, peering anxiously at something off-frame. Anne Cornwell, frozen mid-motion, her face a mask of terror. Finally, the night. 4 figures at the dinner table. And in the window, half concealed by reflection and rain, a towering, faceless silhouette. April's phone buzzed. It was Oliver, his voice ragged. "I'm leaving town a few days. Something's wrong, April. Don't go back to the house. Promise me." But April couldn't sleep. She pinned all the photographs to her beaded wall, arranging them by mood, by sequence, by the growing shadow the tall guest cast over the Cornwells. Each time she looked, the guest seemed to inch closer to the heart of the frame, closer to her. She recorded her thoughts, not for an audience, but for herself. If anyone's listening, the Cornwells didn't just vanish. They were watched, haunted, hunted, and I think it's still watching. She turned off the recorder, but the echo of her own words haunted the empty flat. As outside, thunder rolled, and the rain soaked Sheffield's silent streets. The days blurred. Oliver stayed silent, and April wandered Sheffield in a fog, haunted by faces, both living and lost. The photographs seemed to change subtly every night, shadows shifting, the tall guest growing more distinct, as if the act of looking at them gave him power. Driven by dread and curiosity, April researched the Coldwell's house further. She sought out locals, old enough to remember the family. Most were reluctant, but one, Mrs. Ada Flynn, agreed to meet in a park near an old railway station. She was a small woman, sharp-eyed despite her years. Ada spoke softly. "My brother delivered milk to the Cornwells. He always said their youngest, Ned, wouldn't look strangers in the eye. Not after the man started appearing. A tall man, always at dusk. He never knocked, just watched from behind the hedge." "Did anyone try to report him?" April pressed. Ada shook her head. No one believed children back then, or women. But Anne, the mother, started keeping the children indoors after 5. Once, she told me through the fence, she'd seen something outside the kitchen window, something tall enough that its shadow stretched across the ceiling. April's hands trembled. Did she describe his face? A pause. No one who saw him did. Only the shadow and the feeling like being trapped behind glass while someone takes your picture and you can't move. Back home, April plastered her wall with every account Ada had shared, every detail from her own investigation. Threads between them, connected. Doors left open. Windows never locked. A house that seemed to invite something it couldn't repel. The guest was never forceful, never broke the glass. He only watched, waiting, until at last, someone let him in. That night, as she shuffled through her notes, April heard a soft, unmistakable click from her kitchen. Her blood ran cold. A camera shutter. Somewhere in her flat. April crept towards the kitchen, every light in the flat blazing. There was no one visible, but the air was different, charged and breathless. On the table where she had left the Olympus camera, a single new photograph waited, glossy and fresh. With trembling fingers, she picked it up. The image showed her, asleep in her bed, taken from high above, where no human could stand. At the edge of the picture, almost out of frame, was a long-fingered hand, pale and impossibly thin. Worse still was the reflection in the bedroom window, April's face, and behind her, the tall guest. Faceless, but unmistakably watching. Shaken, April backed into the corridor. She considered calling Oliver, alerting the police, even leaving town. But a raw, stubborn part of her still needed to see this through. She returned to her wall of evidence, adding the new photograph. Warning and a message. Both. April recorded one last message, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I let him in, or if just wanting to understand was enough. He's here now, and I think, whatever happened to the Cornwells, it isn't finished. A door left open can't always be closed again." Somewhere outside, thunder rumbled. In the kitchen, the Olympus camera clicked open for another picture, the cycle continuing, restless as legend, tying past and present in a loop that refused to die. By the next dawn, April knew she had to end it. She packed every photo, negative, and her audio notes, and headed for the city archives. There, she demanded a meeting with a senior archivist, a gruff, practical man named Mr. Baldry. Mr. Baldry greeted her with suspicion, but as April laid everything out, detail by disturbing detail, his demeanor changed. "This is more than folklore," he muttered, peering at the images of the tall guest, the shifting silhouettes, the Cornwells' terrified faces. He listened as April recounted the story from beginning to now, including the disturbing photograph taken of her in the night and the cycle of hauntings that followed. After a long silence, he said, "We have a responsibility, Miss Fenn. This is not just a story to be hidden, nor a threat to be ignored." Together, they prepared a formal dossier: scans, prints, negatives, eyewitness statements, submitted not only to police, but also to a university department that specialized in folklore and unexplained phenomena. April released a carefully anonymized podcast episode, letting the public know the house's history, the warning, and the truth behind the legend. That evening, squads of police and council workers descended on the Cornwell house. They found the cellar, the hidden trunk, and the forgotten artifacts that underpinned 50 years of silence. The property was sealed, scheduled for demolition, the cycle of secrecy finally broken. In the weeks that followed, April often walked by the house, now surrounded by scaffolding and warning signs. She felt neither relief nor triumph, only a strange ache, knowing some stories never truly leave the places where they're made. Then, one rainy afternoon, a thin envelope arrived at her door, with no sender. Inside was a Polaroid, old but undeveloped, and a typed note. "Thank you for seeing. Not everyone can face what stares back." April considered destroying it, but instead, she stored it away, unopened, in a locked box, her final act of defiance. Her podcast found a vast listenership. Some demanded answers, some sent stories of their own. A few shared warnings from their towns about strangers glimpsed at dusk, always taller than any human, always watching but never crossing the threshold. Unless called. April ended her story with a final truth. Closure is not always possible. Sometimes all you can do is share the light and let the shadows know they're seen. The Cornwell house was demolished at the end of autumn. The place where so many watched and were watched by the tall guest was leveled to earth, new grass sown where fear once grew. But sometimes, on misty Sheffield evenings, those who pass the empty lot swear they see a shadow moving just beyond the fence, taller than any living soul, patiently waiting, never quite gone.